greeted the Honourable President, who'd just come back from his first visit to the UK for a couple of years. Very good that he's been able to resume his regular visits. And on on Sunday, we're going to be able to bid farewell to the Honourable Prime Minister, who will be making her first visit to the UK for some time. Of course, she's doing that partly because of COP, but she's also going to have a bilateral programme while she's there. So very happy to talk about that when we get to the questions. But what I'll do, I think, is just talk a little bit about COP26 and all the things that we hope will be accomplished over the next couple of weeks in Glasgow, because this really is a crucial moment for all of us. And I'm very happy to talk about the bilateral relationship, which I think is in a really exciting phase at the moment as we go through the 50th anniversary year. And we look at the really expanding and maturing relationship that we have with Bangladesh as Bangladesh goes through, graduates from LDC status and becomes a middle-income country in the middle of this decade. Because I think it's a really exciting moment of transition. And obviously, all of that builds on the very strong links that already exist between the UK and Bangladesh. The 600,000 strong British Bangladeshi diaspora who make an enormous contribution to life in the UK, and a much wider range of links that exist between us on security, defence, climate change, COVID, trade, and a whole range of issues. And in that context of friendship, I think we might step outside for a couple of hours this afternoon for a certain cricket match that will be taking place, because that is obviously one where it is difficult. Normally I support Bangladesh, except when England's playing this afternoon, England's playing, so I'm more torn than I usually am. I was a bit torn during the Scotland game, I have to say. But anyway, cricket I think is a sign of a friendly rivalry between two democratic partners, and it's great to see that, and I will make no predictions as to who might win. If we look ahead to COP26, the Conference of the Parties, starting this weekend in Glasgow, I mean, it's very clear the seriousness of this event, because it's really the last opportunity that we have to avoid dangerous climate change and secure a brighter future for everyone on the planet. And we can see, both from the scientific evidence, which is very clear from the International Panel on Climate Change, but also, I think, from the evidence of every day's news, shows a new and unprecedented climate thing happening around the world, whether it's wildfires of unprecedented scope in Siberia, it's extraordinary heat waves in Canada, it's floods in Germany, it's cyclones in this part of the world. So wherever we are in the world, we can see that the climate is changing in a way that has profound effects on all of us as inhabitants of the planet. And the Paris Agreement in 2015 agreed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which would lower the risk of these catastrophic events. And it's very clear that this event in Glasgow is really the last best opportunity to work out how we are going to meet those Paris targets. And we as the President, we as the UK as President of this event, have set 4 goals for COP. And I think these are the things you need to watch over the next couple of weeks to see how the negotiation unfolds. But the first target is to get all countries to agree to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, with ambitious interim emissions reductions targets as set out in nationally determined contributions. And what that will enable us to do is to keep the goal of 1.5 alive, and there is clearly serious risk, as we can see from the scientific evidence, that we might not be able to do that. And I would point you towards the UK's own nationally determined contribution, and now backed up by a detailed plan on how we're going to be reforming and radically transforming our own economy to enable us to do our part as a major industrialised economy in meeting those targets. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to look at adaptation and improve the way that countries adapt to the climate crisis and encourage countries affected by climate change to protect and restore ecosystems, build defences, put warning systems in place. And of course, as I'll say in a second in more detail, there's an enormous amount that the world can learn from Bangladesh, and how Bangladesh, as a climate vulnerable country, has adapted in the most remarkable and effective way over the last half century to improve its own resilience. The third thing we're going to be doing is mobilizing finance, including $100 billion annually, which has been promised by developed countries to help developing countries, and helping to unleash the trillions of dollars which are going to be needed really from the private sector to make sure that all of this happens. And we again, the UK, just a couple of days ago, have published a climate finance delivery plan, which is aimed to provide some coherence and clarity on when and how developed countries will meet that 100 billion climate finance goal. And the fourth thing we'll be doing is accelerating action to turn ambition into outcomes by accelerating collaboration between governments, businesses and civil society. And there'll be a really, it's obviously going to be made more difficult by COVID, but we expect over 20,000 delegates at COP. And I have to say the logistics of that have not been straightforward at all, but we have done everything we can, first of all to enable world leaders to meet in person, because it's really in person that the deals can be done, the negotiations can succeed, and we've been very clear about needing world leaders to be there in person. We're delighted that the Honourable Prime Minister is just one of many world leaders who will be doing that. But we've also brought together an extraordinary range of climate activists, third sector, civil society, businesses, all the people who will need to work together to achieve the targets that have been set at leader level. And again, I'm very pleased with a very large Bangladeshi delegation representing all sorts of different strands of interest from this country will be there in Glasgow. We've been working very hard to make sure that the logistics of that work well, as well as the High Commissioners playing a role in helping to convene some of the extraordinary stories from Bangladesh, particularly about adaptation, but also increasingly about new sources of power. And I was very pleased in my residence this week to welcome a company called Solshare, and obviously a Bangladeshi company who have been working on how to provide small-scale solar power sources, how to enable people to generate power on the roofs of their houses from the sun, but also to trade that power between each other, which makes for a much more useful system. And Solshare were a runner-up in the Earthshot Prize launched by Prince William and by Sir David Attenborough, one of the great climate and environmental experts of our time. And I'm very pleased that Solshare will be representing, among the many entities represented, representing Bangladesh at COP in the next couple of weeks. Because I do think, as I say, that there is a remarkable amount that the world can learn from Bangladesh's experience, both in adaptation but also in innovative ways of generating and reducing energy and electricity. So if I just highlight three things building on that we are hoping Bangladesh will do at COP. The first is, as a leader on climate adaptation and highly vulnerable to change, Bangladesh will be putting the moral case for increased investment in adaptation and also offering its practical experience. And Bangladesh is a founding member of what's called the Adaptation Action Coalition, whose aim around the world is to improve countries' ability to adapt, with a particular emphasis on locally led adaptation on the ground. And I really hope that the extraordinary experience from Bangladesh, partly from the government, but also from civil society, NGOs and businesses, will be generous in offering that expertise to the wider global audience in Glasgow. The second thing we'll be hoping Bangladesh will do is to show leadership on mitigation at COP26 by pursuing an ambitious nationally determined contribution. As I was saying, we all have a part to play in this, and we've noticed the radical transformation of Bangladesh's forward energy plans and the removal of very significant elements of coal-fired power from the plans that the government has to generate the electricity that Bangladesh needs to continue to power its economic growth. And we hope that Bangladesh will join others in being ambitious in this space. We've seen some very good progress. We are talking about encouraging even more, and we hope that it will be possible at COP to take over that extra mile for everyone, including Bangladesh, in putting ambitious NDCs on the table. And then the final thing that Bangladesh has a particular role to play on at COP is as a leader of the world's climate vulnerable countries. And clearly the Honourable Prime Minister is attending partly as Prime Minister of Bangladesh, a significant national leader in her own right, but she is also the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which brings together 48 climate vulnerable countries. And Bangladesh has played a remarkable role in convening those countries, and I think that international leadership is going to be very important to making sure that, in a way, sufficient pressure is put on the big emitters by the climate vulnerable to reach the sort of ambitious global deal that is going to be needed. And so clearly the next 3 weeks, 2 of them at COP in Glasgow, are going to be really critical to the future of the planet. But we will be working on this issue with Bangladesh for the longer term, because we have a very significant climate program that we will be announcing very soon, which will enable us to follow up the commitments and the adaptations that we announced at COP with a specific program that will enable us to work with a whole range of partners here in Bangladesh, right across adaptation, mitigation, civil society, and in new areas like small-scale solar generation and electric vehicles. But that's all part of our wider relationship. So I'll stay a little bit just to sort of set the scene, and very happy to debate this and take questions, just about where I think we are in terms of the wider bilateral relationship beyond COP. So what we launched, we are obviously in the UK in an interesting moment in our history because we left the European Union last year. We ended the transition period with the European Union at the end of January of this year. So what we did in March was to publish what we call an integrated review, which looks at our strategic options and our strategic place in the world as we forge a new, completely independent future beyond the European Union. And what we have identified is a very distinct opportunity for us to re-engage. We have very long historic links with the Indo-Pacific region, but Indo-Pacific is very clearly where the growth is, where the populations are growing, where the economies are growing, where a lot of the dynamism in the world economy is coming from. It's the fastest growing economic region and a crucial transit point for global trade, which was a point actually I noticed in the Prime Minister's speech yesterday to the Investment Forum, making more of Bangladesh's geographical position between India, which is obviously an emerging global economic superpower, and ASEAN, which contains many of the world's fastest growing economies. There is perhaps more of an opportunity for Bangladesh to act regionally in that space. But for us, Indo-Pacific is an area which we have strong links in already, but we'll be putting increased diplomatic, trade, security, investment into over the next decade. And for us here in Bangladesh, as the High Commission, we are engaging deeply on issues including climate and biodiversity, maritime security, and all sorts of areas in which we already have a strong relationship with Bangladesh, but we'll be putting in increased emphasis and increased investment. And that includes working with British businesses in building a trade and development relationship as Bangladesh graduates this decade from least developed to middle income country status, which is an extraordinary national achievement. I mean, we have massive respect for what has been done in Bangladesh over the last 50 years under all sorts of different political leadership. And I'm very glad that the Prime Minister, after she finishes in Glasgow, will be going on to London to be the key speaker at a roadshow, along with a range of her senior government colleagues, which will help to promote Bangladesh and the economic opportunities on both sides to an audience of business people in London and Manchester next month. But graduation is a milestone, not a finishing line, and we'll continue to work with Bangladesh to achieve a smooth and successful graduation. And we have decided providing continued duty-free, quota-free access to the UK market for 3 years after graduation, so until 2029. And obviously, as we're the third largest individual destination for Bangladeshi exports, that I think is an important signifier of our continued commitment to work on this relationship, as is our status as the second largest cumulative investor in Bangladesh. So British companies like HSBC, Standard Chartered, Unilever play an extraordinarily important part in the economy of Bangladesh, not least as some of the nation's largest taxpayers. And we will be working with existing investors and new investors among the British business community here in Bangladesh to try to make sure that British businesses can both contribute to and benefit from the extraordinary development of the Bangladesh economy. And our strong view is that stability and economic growth, which we very much hope will continue in Bangladesh, flourishes best for the long term in open and democratic societies with strong institutions, public accountability, and competitive elections. And I think in that free media plays a really important role. We're leading with the Canadians a global campaign on free media, and I have to say it's a great pleasure to see so many journalists here, because I think the ability of the press to ask the difficult questions, hold the powerful to account, is a crucial role in a free society. And I understand, one can see from the global rankings, that this is not an easy task always here in Bangladesh, and I hugely admire the courage and persistence and commitment of the press community, the media community here in Bangladesh, in continuing to carry out the role and duties of a media in a free society, even though there are sometimes we recognise challenges in doing that. And we as the UK, with international partners, will be supporting continue to support plural and democratic practice in Bangladesh, as is set out most admirably in the Constitution, and supporting as far as we can, as external friends, a fair electoral process with protections for voters and participants when the next general election is held. And obviously we will be watching with interest preparations being made for institutions like the Election Commission progress, and look forward to that sending a strong commitment on a free and fair process for the elections when they're next held. And it's just worth noting while we're in this space that clearly, like everyone, we have watched recent events around communities in Bangladesh with some concern, and we've made clear in public and in our conversations with senior people here that we stand with those who support tolerance and religious freedom, again as set out most admirably in the Bangladeshi Constitution, which enshrine freedom of expression and religion, and we very much work with and support people who are working to that end. If we go back to trade and what is happening in that field, I just note that we, as I said, have left the European Union, left the transition arrangements, and that gives us the opportunity for the first time to have a really independent trade relationship with Bangladesh. And I was very pleased in the earlier part of this year to hold the first bilateral UK-Bangladesh trade and investment dialogue. And what we were addressing was market access barriers and the improvements that could be made to the business environment here to enable companies, and it's companies, of course, that drive economic growth in free economies, to realise the potential of Bangladesh's impressive growth. So we do hope that it will be possible to open up this market more than perhaps it has been in the past, to the sort of high-value services that British companies excel in globally, whether it's education, financial services, and health, where Britain is world-leading. And we have products and offers that we think would be of huge value to an increasingly prosperous consumers here in Bangladesh, and we'd like the opportunity to offer those in a market which responds competitively to opening up those opportunities. So we are very pleased that we have the opportunity to start addressing those market access barriers through our independent trade dialogue, and I'm looking forward to the next round of that as soon as we can schedule it. And I think there's a particular opportunity, if we're looking for things that are ready here and now to take forward that economic relationship. We know that British universities are very keen to contribute to higher education in Bangladesh. I went yesterday to the opening of a partnership between Portsmouth University in the UK and the Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Maritime University here in Bangladesh, where they are now working together on issues surrounding governance and the blue economy, which are really interesting areas where I think both sides have a lot to learn from each other. And I think that just provides an example of the sort of partnership that British universities are very keen to establish in Bangladesh. So we've been talking to the Honourable Education Minister about the early implementation of the Cross-Border Higher Education Act to enable more British universities to make their services and their world-class education available to young people here in Bangladesh, which would enable Bangladesh in turn to develop a sort of better trained workforce, which is going to be crucial to flourishing as a middle-income country. So I think there's a genuine win-win in this. We are very happy to work together with our Bangladeshi friends to try and encourage British universities who we know want to come here to establish the right operations and partnerships. I'll just say a little bit more about a couple of particular challenges at the moment. We're continuing to work very closely with the government of Bangladesh on regional security challenges, and of course a particular challenge is the Rohingya crisis created by the actions of the Myanmar army over 4 years ago, and a crisis with which both the Rohingya refugees and Bangladesh and the host communities and the government are continuing to have to work. And we are very clear, we as the UK are very clear that our shared objective in this is for the Rohingyas to go home to Myanmar, to Rakhine State, as soon as that can happen in a way that is dignified, voluntary and safe. That should be the outcome for the Rohingyas. They should go home. They want to go home. It's what nobody wants to live in a refugee camp. And the Rohingyas themselves, their representatives are very clear that their community wants to return home as soon as possible. But clearly, events in Myanmar are moving in a way that is worrying. We've seen, in February, we saw a military coup in Myanmar. We've seen a government which has not so far expressed much interest in this. So I think it's clear that the Rohingya will still be in Bangladesh for some time to come, and we're working very closely with the government to make sure that Bangladesh's extraordinary generosity in hosting the Rohingyas continues, and that the funding is there to provide the Rohingyas with healthcare, food, shelter, water, and sanitation that they need to live lives of basic dignity while they need to be in Bangladesh.